There is a moment, quiet, sterile, almost ordinary, when Jamal Khashoggi steps through the glass doors of the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The autumn light behind him blurs into a pale glow, and for a brief second he looks like any man running an errand. But the door closes with a soft metallic thud, and that sound becomes the last trace of him anyone will ever see alive. Inside, the cool, controlled air of the building feels wrong, too still, too prepared. Cameras outside catch the moment. Inside, no cameras are allowed. What happens next would be sealed behind diplomatic walls, hidden within rooms built for secrecy. It is the beginning of one of the most shocking political assassinations of the 21st century. Jamal had come to the consulate for something painfully mundane, documents confirming he was free to remarry. His fiancée, Hatis Cengiz, waited outside with her phone in hand, expecting him to return in minutes. She had watched him walk inside with a nervous smile, unaware the building had been primed for his arrival long before he appeared at the door. Hours earlier, men had entered the consulate with the precision of a covert team. Some arrived in groups, some split from the airport straight into discreet vehicles. Their movements were deliberate, instructed, practiced. These were not diplomats, they were specialists, security, intelligence, forensics, the kind of men who don't travel unless a task has been defined. Inside the consulate, the hallways were swept clean, offices prepared, schedules cleared. Behind closed doors, a consul's residence room had been converted into something colder, chairs repositioned, a table moved, surveillance spots avoided. The building was wrapped in a strange silence, like a stage before a performance. Khashoggi, for all his years in journalism, could not have imagined the trap waiting for him. He was a man who had spent decades around powerful individuals, who had written about reform, dissent, and the fragile lines of authority inside his homeland. He had friends who became enemies, allies who turned into threats, but he believed he would walk out. Even when he placed his phone with Hatis and told her, "If I don't come out, call someone," his voice was calm, as if he trusted reason more than fear. Inside the consulate, the door closed behind him, and he was greeted politely, almost warmly. Diplomatic courtesy was a performance easily maintained. He was led upstairs. The first minutes were civil, but the shift came quickly. Tones changed, questions sharpened, and the facade dropped. One man told him, "We need you to come back to Riyadh." "I cannot do that," Khashoggi replied, steady but tense. "It will be better for you," the man insisted. "You know that is not true. There are moments in a room when everyone present knows exactly where a situation is headed. This was one of them." What follows, according to official investigations, audio transcripts reviewed by international agencies, and statements from Turkish authorities, was brutal. A struggle, raised voices, a command issued, then the suffocating silence of something irreversible. The consulate's walls absorbed everything. Outside, Hatis waited. Minutes stretched into our knees. She paced. Her palms sweated. She attempted calls that never connected. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, she stood at the same spot where she had last seen him, her fear growing into something she could no longer rationalize. Inside the consulate, the team moved with clinical urgency. They operated like a unit following a rehearsed plan. Some cleaned, others coordinated transportation. Evidence was concealed, removed, destroyed. Meanwhile, diplomatic vehicles rolled out of the compound. Their tinted windows offered nothing. Turkish investigators later traced the movements, where the teams went, where they stayed, where they fled. But that night, the city of Istanbul remained unaware of the storm about to break. It began with a missing persons report, quickly escalated by Turkish officials who sensed something was terribly wrong. Hatis's testimony ignited the first wave of scrutiny, pulling journalists toward the consulate gates. By the next morning, news cameras gathered, microphones raised, and questions multiplied. Saudi officials initially claimed Khashoggi had left the building safely, but the story didn't hold. Turkish authorities leaked fragments, footage of operatives arriving, images of suitcases, records of a cleanup crew entering after the disappearance. Pressure surged. Governments demanded answers. Journalists dug deeper, and somewhere in the chaos, the world realized it wasn't witnessing a disappearance, it was witnessing an assassination inside a diplomatic mission. Executed with chilling precision, Turkish investigators combed through the consulate. Every corner of the building felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding a secret. They took luminol to the floors. They traced suspicious repairs. They examined drainage systems and ventilation chambers. The investigators worked for days, then weeks, chasing traces of a crime that had been designed to leave none. As international outrage grew, so did political tension. Statements from officials shifted day by day. Denials turned into partial acknowledgments. then into reluctant admissions. Meanwhile, global reporters uncovered connections between members of the operation team and senior figures within Saudi security services. The pressure mounted like a drumbeat, forcing governments to confront a brutal geopolitical dilemma: how to respond to a killing that unfolded in the shadows of international diplomacy. Behind closed doors, intelligence agencies exchanged information. Some possessed intercepted communications. Some held evidence too sensitive to reveal publicly. The picture they pieced together was disturbing: a coordinated mission, executed swiftly, concealed aggressively. Whether it was sanctioned at the highest levels remained an explosive question, one that nations debated carefully, aware of the consequences of naming conclusions outright. Yet one thing emerged undeniably clear: Jamal Khashoggi had walked into a consulate seeking paperwork, and he never walked out. The pressure on the Saudi government intensified. Eventually, officials admitted Khashoggi had been killed inside the consulate, framing it as a rogue operation gone wrong. But by then, investigators worldwide had already pushed beyond those explanations. The story, fragmented and politically charged, continued to unfold as diplomats, analysts, and intelligence officers stepped into the spotlight. But the closest truth remained in the evidence. The timeline, the recordings analyzed by multiple governments, the forensic data gathered from the consulate, the flight logs of the team sent to Istanbul, and the sequence of evolving official statements. Meanwhile, Hattis spent every day speaking to investigators, journalists, and officials. She fought through grief to demand answers, refusing to let the world forget. Her voice became the emotional center of the narrative, a reminder that this wasn't merely a political scandal but a human tragedy. As the global fallout continued, governments re-evaluated alliances, sanctions were issued, arms deals were questioned, intelligence committees met behind locked doors. In many countries, Khashoggi's case became a symbol of the dangers faced by dissidents and journalists worldwide, and within those government halls, dimly lit, quiet, guarded people whispered the same question: how far does responsibility reach? The story did not end with the investigations, nor with the trials conducted later. Even as officials were charged and sentenced within Saudi Arabia, debates continued over transparency, accountability, and the unanswered questions that lingered. Years passed, but the image of Khashoggi entering the consulate remained frozen in the public mind. A man seeking documents for a new life who instead walked into a carefully arranged trap. The aftermath reshaped diplomatic conversations across continents. Intelligence analysts used the case in training briefings. Diplomats cited it during negotiations. Journalists invoked it when discussing press freedom. Human rights groups carried it like a banner. And in classrooms, students learning international relations were taught about the invisible lines between sovereignty, morality, and political power. In Istanbul, outside the consulate, vigils were held. Candles flickered in the cold evening wind. People spoke his name quietly, respectfully, as though he could hear them through the glass walls he once walked past. And Hatta, standing among them, often stared at the same door where she had last seen him, as if trying to rewrite the moment with memory alone, but the door never opened. The story of Jamal Khashoggi is not only a narrative of a murder inside a consulate. It is a window into the dark interplay of state power, secrecy, and the lengths institutions will go to protect themselves. It is about the individuals caught in the machinery of geopolitics, and it is about how truth emerges not all at once, but in fragments, each carrying a weight that nations can't easily bury. As the years passed, governments released reports, some more direct than others. The details differed, but the gravity remained constant. A journalist was killed inside a diplomatic mission. His death shook alliances and exposed contradictions that many preferred to keep hidden, and still, the story reverberates. In every newsroom where editors debate whether to publish a sensitive article, in every embassy hallway guarded by silent officers, in every meeting where diplomacy balances precariously against hard political realities, it lingers because it revealed something most people suspect but seldom see so clearly: that behind the polished language of international relations lies a world of clandestine decisions, private commands, and consequences that unfold far from public view. In the end, Jamal Khashoggi's final moments inside that consulate remain locked away, known only through fragments collected by investigators. But his disappearance, captured in those last few seconds on camera, became a global turning point, and perhaps that is why the story haunts so deeply, because the door closed behind him, and the silence that followed changed everything.